Welcome to the second 2023 edition of VU Sports Wired, Vanderbilt Video Productions' premier sports talk show. My name is Bobby Kent, a Vanderbilt Hustler senior staff writer, and I am your host. I am joined by Jonah Barbin, Hustler sports copy editor. On this week's show, we will discuss both men's and women's basketball results from this past week and look ahead to their upcoming contests. First, we start with men's basketball. Vanderbilt suffered a historic loss to then number 4 Alabama last Tuesday, surrendering 101 points in a 57-point loss. The loss ranks as the third biggest loss in Vanderbilt program history, only behind the two 60-plus point losses to Kentucky in 2003 and 1947. It was also the Tide's largest ever margin of victory against an SEC opponent. The Commodores fell behind very early, surrendering a 21-0 run in the first half en route to a 43-15 halftime deficit. The second half wasn't much better, as Bama scored 58 to Vanderbilt's 29. The Commodores responded this past weekend, however, narrowly defeating Ole Miss at home 74-71 in a game that was back and forth for the majority of the contest. The win snapped Vanderbilt's 4-game SEC losing streak and improved their record to 11-12, 4-6 in the SEC, good for 9th place in the standings. Vanderbilt faces yet another highly ranked foe when 6th-ranked Tennessee comes to town on Wednesday night. So Jonah, what can you even say about the Alabama game? The best moment was that 5-0 lead to start the game, and then it all went downhill. What happened?
Yeah, they never really stood a chance, Bobby, unfortunately. And maybe we had the perception that for some reason Liam Robbins back, that they could stand a chance, being that they only lost by about 10 in the last game. But Brandon Miller was on, and I told you if Alabama brought their A game, the Commodores would stand no chance. Unfortunately, Alabama brought their A game. I mean, insult to injury, Jordan Wright gets a concussion by banging into Liam Robbins, and Liam Robbins' face is destroyed in the first game he comes back in. I mean, it's just so unfortunate. It was a cacophony of errors. We've lost by Alabama. We've lost to 55 points to Alabama in 2 different sports now this year. It's rough. It's rough. You know, the talent gap is still there, right? Whether we brought our game or not, which we didn't, this was going to be an impossible game to win on the road. That's a hostile environment. That is a building team. That is a team with a top pick in the NBA draft and a team that can go really far in this tournament. And unfortunately, Bobby, the Commodores just aren't there yet.
No, definitely not, and unfortunately not. I mean, it also doesn't help when you shoot 25% from the field and 10% from 3 when you make 3 threes and your opponent makes 19 threes. So perimeter defense was not a strong suit for Vanderbilt in that game. Also, they let Alabama shoot 59% from the field. So basically 60%. I mean, anytime you shoot 60% from the field, you're pretty much going to win. But doing it in the way that they did it, and also to add insult to injury, they got the walk-ons down at the end, and they got the, they wanted 100 points, and they got it, especially with a couple threes. So it was just a really tough game for Vanderbilt all around. I think Paul Lewis led all scorers with 10 points, and Liam Robbins only had 9. So it's just, I think it's almost one where you kind of just, you burn the tape and you move on, right? There's only thing you can do.
Yeah, it's tough. And, you watch Stackhouse after the game, and obviously he's very upset. The culture, there seems to be a cultural problem. There was a great article written by sports editor Bryce Smith just kind of about everything going on with the team. But right now, I feel like Jerry Stackhouse is reeling. And I've said that I think he's the guy for the job. I think Jerry Stackhouse is a really good coach fundamentally. But right now, there's a clear culture problem in the locker room. Losing 101-44 is not just a problem with your quality of play. The gap between Vanderbilt and Alabama is there, but it's not, a 55-point gap, right? That's more significant. That speaks to the culture building in this locker room. So this team needs to turn it around, and they did in a way, and we'll talk about that. But when you lose by that amount of points, I think Stackhouse knows you need to look yourself in the mirror and say, what are we building here, and what are we standing for as a basketball team?
Well, Vanderbilt certainly stood for something on Saturday when they beat Ole Miss. So what stood out to you about that game, and how did they respond?
Yeah, I mean, that was a game that you had to win, right? You have probably a lesser opponent, right, on paper, at home, and you got to bounce back and find a way to win. Now, the offense was interesting. Not a great field goal percentage, even though Liam Robbins was the dominant offensive presence, still shot a pretty low field goal percentage, right? So I was not thrilled on that side of the ball. But defensively, they were really strong. Liam Robbins had like 8 blocks, right? He was really dominant in the post, which is what we're used to seeing from him. So he's really getting back to form. For the first time this season, and coincidentally, well, not coincidentally, actually, it was a game plan thing, but the last time QMB and Liam Robbins were both in the starting lineup was against Ole Miss last year. So they like to play big against Ole Miss, and it does work. I think those two guys on the floor learning how to kind of dish it to each other, learn how to close up in that post together are really strong. Listen to this defensive stat. They only allowed 7 free throws for Ole Miss the entire game. That's really strong. When you're sending your opponent to the charity stripe 7 times, those are games you're going to be in. The biggest blowouts of the year for Vanderbilt have been when the opponents go to the free throw line 30 or more times. Not even close with 7, Bobby.
No, definitely. And I mean, there was a lot of players too stepped up. Not even just, you mentioned QMB, he had 10 points. Robbins stepped up huge defensively, had 19 points. Although you mentioned that the field goal percentage is a little bit concerning. But Tyron Lawrence had his first career triple-double or double-double in this game, 18 points, 10 rebounds. He went on a couple scoring runs by himself, so that was pretty big to see. I mean, even Ezra Mannion, he made some clutch plays down the stretch, right? Miles Studi with the dagger 3 with less than a minute left. So it was a full team effort, and we've said it before. This is what this team needs to be able to win games, right? And they probably should have lost this game, but it's a good sign they were able to stay in it and keep it up. But a little bit concerning is Jordan Wright missing his 3rd game of the year with a concussion. So hopefully, Stackhouse said there's a chance for him to play against Tennessee. So hopefully he does. So what do you think? Speaking of Tennessee, what do you think the keys are to keeping it close?
Oof, man. Well, okay. What we saw from Liam Robbins against Ole Miss was so encouraging that if he can do that but better against Tennessee, I feel good about sticking in this game. And what I mean by that is not like, oh my gosh, he was already good and now has to be amazing. Liam Robbins takes a lot of shots from the interior, right? And a lot of them just come up a little short. If Liam Robbins can find a way for those little turnaround floaters, he's tough to guard. He's a big guy, right? A couple more of those to drop, shoot, 40s, maybe 50% from the field as a big man. That would be huge, right, into staying into this game. Jordan Wright's injury is something I'm monitoring as well. Miles Studi, he shoots a lot of threes, man. And I know he has games where he'll hit 7 and everybody says, wow, look at this. And he ranks 5th in the SEC in three-point shooting. But look how many attempts he has. So Studi has to be a little more efficient with the 3-ball. I know he has it in him. It's just kind of high-quality shots. And what Stackhouse said in his post-game press conference after Ole Miss needs to apply, right? Adjusting on defense, really swarming to the ball, seeing where Tennessee is distributing it, and then Stackhouse having the acumen, which he does have, to adjust as the game goes along, right? Be disciplined, prevent trips to the free throw line, and force Tennessee to beat you. They're probably going to beat you anyway, right? They can make shots from all over the floor, but force them to do it. Don't give it up easy.
Next, we transition over to women's basketball, where Vanderbilt was riding high following its first SEC victory over Texas A&M a little over a week ago, when Kaija Harbison dropped 41 points in a special performance. Unfortunately for Vanderbilt, they could not keep the momentum, losing their last 2 contests to Missouri and Georgia. Poor shooting doomed the Commodores in both games, as Vanderbilt shot under 40% from the field in both games. Vanderbilt's SEC record now sits at 1-9, and they are 10-14 overall, good for 13th in the SEC. So let's look at these 2 games together. It seems a common theme emerges: poor shooting and turnovers. What happened?
Yeah, we go back to kind of the unfortunate reality of where the team is right now, Bobby. Sure, these errors are happening, but I'm not looking at it as, oh my gosh, I wish they just shot better or turned the ball over a little less and things would be extremely different. Unfortunately, Vanderbilt is at the point. Look at the SEC record, 1-9. That doesn't come from a few turnovers. That comes from a continual problem of just building up and matching up to the talent in the SEC. Again, just like in men's basketball, the SEC is loaded in women's basketball. So when you look at that, right, and the fact that you're 1-9 against the SEC, it's going to take a lot. The only team that they've beaten is A&M, which is below them, right? They haven't been able to find a way to string together a win against anybody else. In non-conference play, they're all right? They hang around 500, maybe a little bit above. But Shea Ralph knows there's still stepping stones. And maybe a stepping stone for this team is the hiring of Katie Lou Samuelson as the new director of player development for the Commodores. Now, Samuelson is in the WNBA. First of all, former star at UConn while Shea Ralph was there. So that's a nice connection there and makes sense why the Commodores are bringing her on. But she's also a star in the WNBA in her own right, playing for the Los Angeles Sparks right now. So to have a professional mindset in there, somebody who's been in been part of that championship program at UConn. That's why we have so much faith in Shea Ralph. Also, just the kind of person she is and getting to know her. Plus, being in the WNBA right now and playing with the most talented players in the world, right? Having that perspective coming onto this team is one of those things that we can start looking at in a way to bridge the gap between Vanderbilt and other programs in the SEC. So while I look at these games and I kind of say same old story, right? 1-9 against the SEC, a lot of work to go. It's hirings like this that make me confident that this team is headed in the right direction, Bobby.
Yeah, I think you make a lot of really good points. Those things from the higher macro level I think are really going to help the program. But in terms of the things at the micro level, with the game and what went wrong specifically, Vanderbilt shot under 40% in both these games. They shot 39% against Mizzou and shot 34% against UGA. They were under 40% for three as well, 22% against UGA and 36% against Missouri. You can't have that. That's something that hopefully they know they're going to have to fix. And being outscored in every quarter is a huge problem. Vanderbilt was outscored in 3 of 4 quarters in both games against Missouri and UGA. Against Missouri, they tried to make a run late, but it was too late, and the game was out of hand by that point. Kaija Harbison had 26 in the game against Missouri. She had 19 against UGA, and her and Washington and Gerard are having are the big three for Vanderbilt, but they can't do it all themselves, right? This team is obviously, as we talked about on our last show, this team has had 2 players had season-ending injuries before the season started, and then they had their top recruit transfer out. So, only having 3 players available on the bench while other teams have 6 is a very, big disadvantage for them. But I like what you said, though. I think this program, they're making the right moves in the macro level. I think hiring of Katie Lou Samuelson is going to be really great for the program, show a lot of the players, hey, I've done it before, and here's what you can be. And then I think players will really adapt to that, and I think that also helps recruiting, too. So while it's rough right now, I think it'll definitely get better for the Commodores in the future. So I think that'll do it for this week's edition of VU Sports Wired. Thank you for listening. Next week, we'll be back to talk more basketball and also our Vandy Boys preview as the season kicks off next Friday.